Hey, Taryn, I have a question.
What's up?
It could wait. It could wait.
All right. We still have some people piling in. So I'll give them just a minute here. Okay, first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to our panel on lived experiences in the juvenile justice system. We have 5 different panelists currently, and hopefully another one joining us from inside a facility. And things can be unpredictable inside a facility, so hopefully she can join us, and if she can't, that's okay. We'll continue on without her then. I am Dr. Taryn Vanderpyle. I'm in the Criminal Justice Sciences Division at Western Oregon University. This is a 2-part series. So we have tonight on lived experiences, and then tomorrow night on walking the talk, people who are doing work in the system with kids impacted by the system. So hopefully you can join us for that as well. We will be doing this in kind of 2 different parts. First of all, we are going to, sorry, just see in the chat that Alyssa's here. Okay, Alissa is here, but for some reason not showing up. So hopefully we can get those technical issues figured out. Hi, Alissa. I want to just let you know that we're gonna be doing some pre-planned questions up front. And then we're going to open it up for question and answer. So if you have questions you would like to ask of any of the panelists, please submit those to the question and answer button. Should be at the bottom of your screen and says Q&A. That's where we will be pulling the different questions from. We're going to begin with panelist introductions. But first I want to tell you, I'm kind of stalling as people continue to come in. So thank you for your patience. And hopefully we can get Alissa up on screen too. These webinars are being recorded, and I'll post them up on YouTube and share the links going forward. Still stalling. People still joining. All right, so as Alissa tries to work out her technology, and hopefully they can get her showing up here for us, because we'd love to hear from her. Alissa, I'm not sure what to do otherwise. Maybe you can submit stuff to the chat and we'll see it. But in the meantime, let's do some introductions. I'm just going to go in the order of our flyer. So Catherine, will you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. My name is Catherine Jones. I am the ICANN Leadership Development and Support Coordinator at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, and also a very proud member of the ICANN network, comprised solely of formerly incarcerated children that were sentenced to extreme or life sentences. I was 13 years old when I was incarcerated for a second-degree murder in the state of Florida. I served 17.5 years, came home at the age of 30. Did everything I could to prepare, only to find out that the collateral consequences of incarceration would follow me every day of my life. And so I have a passion to fight to change that. And thank you all for having me again.
Glad to have you here, Catherine. Thank you. Josh, how about you?
Thank you. Thank you, Taryn. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, co-panelists. My name is Josh Cain, and I was incarcerated at the age of 18 for a felony murder conviction and served almost 22 years before having my sentence commuted by the governor in June of this year. So I've been home for just a few months, and I'm very grateful to be here. Most of my experience has been with the adult correctional system. But my co-defendant and brother, Trevor Walraven, who will be speaking tomorrow, was 14 years old at the time of the crime. And we were, as I said, co-defendants. And I got to experience a lot of what he was going through vicariously, or through conversations with him and our family, being impacted by both the adult correctional system and the youth correctional system. And being 18 years old, I certainly am a firm believer in raising the age, because I know that I was not making adult decisions at 18, let alone 28. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Robert?
All right. Hello. Thank you for having me, Taryn. Thank everybody else for being on the panel with me and allowing me on the panel. My name is Robert White. I take on many hats and many forms, spoken word artist, activist, mentor, which is kind of what I do in my day-to-day life, which I work for the POIC in the Rosemary Anderson High Schools, particularly under the CHI program, where I mentor at-risk youth, young men ranging from 12 to 18 that have been impacted by the system in some sort, either coming home or being on probation, XYZ. And honestly, I guess my story starts kind of, I was 17 and got charged with a robbery and burglary, and didn't know anything about the system. Fortunately, throughout my stay, I met a lot of different mentors, a lot of different friends, a lot of different associates. Honestly, I learned a lot of things from that helped guide my way to where I'm at today, where when I was released in 2015, had the honors of going to the White House and traveling and speaking for the Annie Casey Foundation as one of their former, I guess, youth council members, where we kind of looked over policies across the nation and seeing how it was affecting youth reform efforts. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah. Thank you.
Amy and Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Amy Cole. First and foremost, I'm a parent. Our family's journey started with the juvenile justice system in 2013 after learning about Jonathan's incarceration. He was a family friend. For over 7 years, I've been heavily involved as a volunteer with the Oregon Youth Authority, an active member of their Family Advisory Council, acting as an advocate for families by sharing concerns and feedback and offering solutions to increase family engagement within the agency. There's nothing better than boots on the ground experience when being asked to speak. You chuckle. In a family's perception. Both my husband and I have made ourselves available to connect with new families by attending the monthly intake orientation meetings that the OYA holds. And the most rewarding times have been spent hosting game nights and holiday parties for the youth and their family. And Jonathan officially became our son in 2015 through an adult adoption.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. You're next.
Thanks. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to come up here and being able to speak and share my perspective and also hear everybody else's. I first entered the system when I was 17 years old in around, August of 2012. I was facing a felony murder in the first degree, and I ended up pleading down once I went through pretty much the county system. And like everybody else here, I didn't really know anything about the system and how it worked. I was represented by a state paid attorney, and pretty much through the counsel of my parents, friends, family, and other relatives, I took a plea deal for 10 years. I served about 7.5 of that. During my time there, I acted as a mentor, took advantage of many of the opportunities that were actually within the Oregon Youth Authority, and I never had a transfer actually into the Department of Corrections per se, or DOC, and took advantage of what I had there, worked my butt off, and I was given a clemency commutation by Governor Brown this last December, and I've been home for about 10 months now, and taking it easy, one step at a time. But like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. It's good to see you all, and look forward to what we got to do.
Jonathan's attorney, and Josh, she was your attorney too, right? She's going to be on our panel tomorrow, so we can learn more about that. And Alissa, yay!
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you. See you.
perfect.
Sorry about the technical.
Sorry, that took really long for no reason.
I think it was my fault actually. I'll take this one, but nonetheless, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Alissa. I was incarcerated at the age of 17, and like Jonathan said, I mean, I had no idea about the system. I know a lot of like my family was incarcerated, but it was never a conversation of, oh, like this is what your lawyer should be doing. And for me, it was like my lawyer was like, hey, you should take this plea, not go to trial. If you go to trial, you're going to be screwed. So of course, I mean, I was scared into it, and I took a plea for 5 years. I have like 5 months left, and I mean, I don't know, I guess this whole time I've been really focused on myself, but I also met a lot of people that had just been screwed by the system, and just there's a lot that I have to say about it. Let's just say that.
Well, this is going to work out really good then. We're going to give you a chance to do that. Thank you, everybody. I want to start getting into some of our heavier questions. We're just going to start heavy right from the start. There's nothing really light about this. So, Catherine, you said you were 13 when all this started for you. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be told at 13 that you're going to be spending so many years incarcerated?
It felt as though that all of the words that would normally be used to describe a 13-year-old girl, such as daughter, student, child, kind, compassionate, were stripped away and replaced with new labels of felon, murderer, violent offender, criminal, menace to society, super predator. I was no longer looked at as a human, but some type of inferior being that should be feared and discarded and treated like an animal. And I was scared. I felt helpless. I was overwhelmed by a system and a world that was unfamiliar to me and unknown. I went from middle school to an adult prison. And I don't think there's really words adequate enough to describe the ordeal of trying to deal with that, besides having to conform to my environment and get into survival mode. And it was traumatizing, for lack of a better word.
Josh, you were 18, so do you feel that, gosh, I mean, you mentioned raising the age already. Do you feel that it was any easier for you at 18 to be told you were going to be incarcerated for all this time?
It definitely wasn't easy for me. I can't speak to somebody else's, experience in that way, but I would say that for me, it was very unrealistic. Like, it just didn't feel real. It was so hard to grasp that amount of time. And I think for a number of years, it was I had no real understanding of that I would actually reach the end of it at some point. The sentence was 25 years. And for me, that felt like, that was longer than I had lived. And so it didn't feel really attainable. And so, that was the overwhelming feeling for me, was just like a hopelessness. Like, there's no way this is gonna end. And as I grew, and my brain developed over the next few years, I came to understand that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and that I needed to take advantage of what opportunities I could while I was there, because it was my life. So, I mentioned earlier that I firmly believe in raising the age, and I feel as though I lived through that, in that transition from youth to adulthood. I lived through that in experiencing whether or not, experiencing going from it feeling unrealistic, the sentence itself feeling unrealistic, to grasping that, this was where I was at, and understanding that, I had a purpose and a need to develop myself, and then to start helping other people and being a mentor to others, and giving the things that I had been given back. So that in that area where I started, really growing, was when I recognized what Catherine mentioned about feeling dehumanized. And it was something that had really kind of occurred without me realizing it. And as I became more educated and more, mature, I started realizing that, and really took a passion in battling back against that.
Thank you. Alissa, you mentioned that when you went through the process, you didn't understand what was happening. I'm curious about the kind of, if there were any plea negotiations, or if you had support from adults you trusted, or if you kind of had to do this on your own. What was that like?
For me, I mean, my parents are divorced. They both have been in the system. I guess they were just as scared as I was, like thinking, oh, their little girl is going through this. And so, like, they would go with me and talk to my lawyer, and because I was on house arrest for a while, out on bail. And I guess they were just as scared. Like, they just wanted to get the least amount of time possible. And the only way that my lawyer brought that up was by taking a plea. So, I mean, I didn't really have any other additional information. It wasn't a lot of help. I think they were just as scared as I was, maybe even more.
Yeah. Amy, Alissa mentioned parents being scared. I feel like you can speak to that. What is it like from the parent perspective, and what sort of things are helpful?
That's a great question. Our situation was extremely different because we were not blood relative. Mm-hmm. And so we were really blocked by his attorney from knowing anything. They really kept us in the dark, but that didn't stop us. We're kind of annoying, didn't give up. But I want to say, as a parent, there's just so many feelings related to a child becoming incarcerated, right? There's confusion, there's anger, there's embarrassment, there's guilt, the feeling of loss, and overwhelming sadness. And, as a parent or a guardian, you just need to stay involved. This is my advice for the last 7 years, is get involved, stay involved, continue to parent as much as you can. Advocate for your child, ask questions, get to know the staff at all levels. I mean, we even went to the director of the OYA and sat down with him and just said, what can we do for you? We treated Jonathan like our other 2 children. We got involved. We wanted to be there at every turn. Really create a collaborative relationship with the agency, and again, the staff. Participate in any and all meetings that are related to your youth's treatment programs, their education, training, and just after COVID, volunteer. Once this little mess of COVID goes away and people can get back in the facilities, just be there as often as you can. Write letters, take calls. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Any way you can communicate and connect with the youth is vital.
So Jonathan, what was that like for you?
Well, there's a long backstory to that. So my best friend, Jackson, is my mom and dad's son. He and I went to school together from age 6 to 9. And we had a separation when my dad passed away when I was 9 years old. I had to go live with the extended family with my uncle, and that's when things pretty much went south. I lived there for the better part of about 7 or 8 years, went through tremendous amounts of abuse that eventually led to me committing my crime of being incarcerated. Upon becoming incarcerated, my mom and dad found out about me on a newspaper. They saw my picture, and that basically sparked an interest for them to get really involved and figure out where I was. And I was told when I was sitting in juvie that I had a visit. And this is after being there probably for about a week or so. And I pretty much told the CO person at the time, there's no way in hell that's possible because I have nobody. I literally didn't. And he's like, no, you have a visit. And then I see both of these two, my mom and my dad, sitting there behind a glass. And they're like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, I wasn't really expecting this after 8 years. So I was a bit taken aback, but over time, I had to relearn how to basically be a part of a family unit and basically pull those, those layers of, like an onion away from myself and be able to open up and be able to do that inner work. And after a while, it wasn't just about, oh, you're part of the family. No, there comes expectations, there comes goals, there comes other factors. I'm a very big believer that if I didn't have that type of support when I was in, I would not be the person, I would not be the man I am today because of it. Because I would have just been bar none. I went in with a 1.1 GPA. Like I was not sharp. I was not good with school. I was not good with, behavior and all that other type of stuff. It came from being supported and guided by like a family atmosphere that got me going for my education and, doing healthy pro-social things within the environment which I was in. It's a big part of support. That's where it comes from. And I saw that reflection in the peer groups and people that I would spend time with that didn't have that support. So I'm extremely blessed for that. But that's why she touched on so many different things that are important. It's so important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, I know you had some people who ended up being significant mentors for you too, if I'm remembering right. Can you talk about the people in your life and the difference they made for you at that time in particular?
Yeah, so I kind of went into like the jail setting, judicial system, I guess, with kind of a blank canvas. Granted, my big brother was locked up, but he's kind of distant, lived with his mother and stuff like that. So it was kind of at a strain, and everything that I learned about jail was due to TV and media. So I had this mindset where once going into this environment, I had to have my guard up, and I had to essentially eat or be eaten, sort of type of scenario. So once first entering, it was just, I kind of peeped game from the other individuals and seeing how they acted. So I was 18 when I went to or they came when I was 18. So I immediately went to the adult facility or county, and I just kind of sat back and watched and seen how they operated and how they acted. So once I got to transitional facility, the different staff, I kind of stood back, and a lot of the staff, they were like, hey, something different about you. And granted, I was just like, this is your job. You're supposed to say this. We're supposed to become correct. This is corrections type thing. But a lot of the staff, the way they would talk to me, it wouldn't be just staff to a youth or, lesser or whatever. But a lot of them sat down and really broke down and gave me their heart, and I gave them my heart, and they showed a level of vulnerability. And for me, that was a tough thing to do, especially in that environment, was to be vulnerable. But they showed me that it was okay. So I first found kind of mentorship and favor in a lot of the staff's eye, including OIA superintendent at the time, Fairbourse, who's to this day like a dad and mentor to me. But it was just sitting down and breaking layers and breaking barriers that I feel like through kind of, again, the culture of jail has been putting up through years, where it's kind of a humanity that's taken away. Once you're in there, it's like, hey, you're a bad person. You start taking on these titles, and you start taking on these labels, and it becomes part of you until somebody tells you differently, right? So I think with a lot of encouragement and a lot of, again, breaking down those barriers, that was a big thing for me in connecting. But it kind of goes back to the parenting role. It takes a village to raise a child, right? Even though Amy's not Jonathan's mother, still that effort of reaching out made a total difference, right? Made him the man he is today. And that's the same thing, I would say, kind of to my story.
Yeah. And just for the record, she is his mother now.
Well, yeah, now, okay, sorry. Clarification.
I want her to get full credit for that.
Yeah, sorry about that, sorry.
Alissa, I'm going to come back to you. Where do you see our criminal justice system or juvenile justice system needing to change the most? That's a big question.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, probably just like individualizing it, because we all go in there and I guess we're all labeled, criminals, we're labeled felons, whatever. And the reality is we're all so different, and we all need different things in order to succeed and to grow as individuals. And that being said, just I guess changing like the amount of energy and time that goes into treatment, the training that the staff have. I mean, it needs to be way more trauma informed. It needs to have, like, the staff need to be more educated on what we're going through, you know, because I mean, we all understand that's their job, but it's also like puts us in a position where that's our life, you know what I mean? And so being able to have them understand that and understand some of the things that we've been through and things that we still need to work on to grow and be successful, like those are the things that they should be aware of 100%. And I think also like the idea of peer support, because like having people that have been through the struggle, that understand all of the things that, you know, we've been through and are able to elaborate on that and show that there's hope in the system and there's hope in our lives, you know, because I mean, being sentenced, I'm sure we all felt like our lives were over. And at that point, like we didn't have anybody that went through that. We don't understand what we were going to get ourselves into, and being able to come out on the other side and explain that to other people that are in those shoes, like that's crucial to the success of people in the system.
I love that. You said a couple of things that I want to ask other folks about as well. Catherine, Alissa mentioned that it would be better if the system was individualized. So if it was individualized for you, what would that look like for a 13-year-old girl, and or what would have been helpful for you?
Mm-hmm.
If it was individualized, there would have been a question of why or how this 13-year-old girl had gotten to this point, but it was not. It was this thought of when they put that label of murder or homicide on you, that it automatically puts you in a class that you cannot be rehabilitated, or you are not worth investing time in. Like you've crossed the line. And the truth of the matter is, Taryn, to what you were saying about the things that need to be changed, is the truth is that America needs to change the stance, because we're the only country that does that we will completely throw a child away. This is the only country in the world that will say that a child is worth nothing more than to die in prison. It will sentence a child to a life sentence. When we look at the roots of it, and we can't not acknowledge this, and it seems like this big elephant in the room, but the current state of incarceration, particularly with children, is a direct result of systemic racism in this country. And when they look at Black and brown children automatically deemed as more aggressive or more mature, that we're going to be treated differently in the criminal justice system. I had another 15-year-old girl in the county with me. I was a 13-year-old girl, and because she had money, because her family had influence, she received probation for a homicide charge, whereas I received an 18-year prison sentence with life probation, because my economic class and my race played a role in that. And that should not be the case in the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system, in America as in general.
Wow, that was powerful. I would really love to keep, we could keep going on that for a long time. I'm going to dance around, and we're going to come back to some of the issues, really important issues you brought up. Before we do, Josh, I wanted to come to you with another thing that Alissa mentioned. She mentioned peer support, and that seemed like it was, I know it was a big factor when your brother joined you in the adult system, of course, because he had you. What was peer support like for you, and how did that make a difference for you?
Well, I would say it made a huge difference for me, and I think honestly it does for everybody, in especially being young coming in. Like Robert was talking about, you see what other people around you are doing in order to understand what the culture of the place is. And I think that I was very blessed and have been blessed, all the way through my life, with having a great deal of positive support. So I had a lot of family support, and that was great. But, as was mentioned earlier, having the people who have lived the experience and have an understanding and some perspective that they can share with you is a big deal. And I had a lot of people who were, for whatever reason, luck or happenstance, people who were headed the right direction or who had already made positive changes while incarcerated were largely the ones who stepped up to try to help me to make positive changes and to show me where those avenues for potential were. So some of that was, hanging out with guys outside in the recreation yard, and some of that was in classes and cognitive thinking trainings, and some of that was on the job. Some of that was working with people who were able to, share that with me and provide me with support and encouragement instead of, me being pulled the other direction. And so I think that that's huge. And I think that it's something that especially occurs with people who have already done a substantial amount of time because they've grown through the process and they've gotten to the point where they don't want to see the youngster who they used to be on the the revolving door or be in and out of the hole. And so they take on a passion to give that positive energy and support to people, and the more of that the better, in my opinion.
Thank you. I want to note that some really beautiful messages are coming in through the chat, and I would love to be able to read all of those. I won't be able to read them later probably, but I want to remind everybody too, if you want to submit questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A little button at the bottom of your screen. And after we get done going through, we have a whole list of questions of things that we want to make sure we talk about. So once we get through those, we definitely want to hit the questions from the attendees. So please submit your questions to the Q&A, and thank you for the messages you're putting in the chat. And again, we'll make sure that everybody gets to see those who you want to see those. Jonathan, I want to come to you next. One of the questions that people often are curious about is, what is a typical day like inside? But I'm curious too, what was a typical day like in the beginning versus what it was like in the end? Because I know that you went through a lot of different experiences and changes just like everybody else. So is that something you can tell us more about?
Yeah, it's definitely, I can shed light on that. So when I first got into the system, I was held at a juvenile and county level. So roughly, depending on where I was housed at, simple wake up. You're getting up at about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. You have breakfast, mandatory rec. Usually, if you're at a juvenile level, you're going to have about 2 to 3 hours of school in the morning, and you're all held in the classroom. You're confined to a seat. You're told to do work. It's not what you would call pretty much a subpar, education compared to what you would get in the community. Pretty much substitute teachers. And then you would have your lunch, usually another rec opportunity, but usually a lot of cell time. And after that, you would usually go for school for another 2 or 3 hours, and usually more cell time, more confinement, and usually more recreation opportunity, get you out of your cell, and then usually dinner. And that's pretty much it. You're back in your cell. A lot of it's about confinement, and a big part of the earlier stages of actually being incarcerated and being placed there is to make it uncomfortable for you, which I think plays a really big key into why they push what you'd call it, not necessarily convictions, but plea deals. That's why people honestly crack a lot more, because it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And it's a big rumor mill about basically the next place you'll go is going to be better than what you're currently experiencing. That's a big thing. That's what I felt too. That's where I felt my pressure. I was in county for roughly about 6 months. I was in juvie a month prior to that. And then my normal day-to-day life when I was in OA, it was a similar structure, but it wasn't necessarily confinement, because it's pretty much a dorm setting. So there's a level system. The better behavior you have, whether it's through education, whether it's through peer relations, staff relations, you get more privileges, more opportunities to do more with your time. A lot of that took place for me when I transferred over to McLaren through a lot of opportunities often through Kathleen Fullerton and Hope Partnership Foundation, through Janus Youth Programs. I'm trying to remember everything from my tours, Kathleen, I know you're here. But a lot of that was like after school hours. And then after, going through everyday stuff, you have school, you got rec, and you got opportunities to also do groups, and it's really there for the taking. But during my earlier stages of times, it was mostly just school, rec opportunities, and confinement. And then as I got older throughout the system, I was there for about 7.5 years. Towards the end of my time, I dedicated the last 2 years of my time honestly being a living mentor on one of the intake units, Noble. So I'm a McLaren Youth Correctional Facility in Woodburn. And my expectation was to pretty much work with youth 24/7. So I would go to work, usually at the barbershop, because I got my barbering license there. I would go to the barbershop, hang out there for a little bit, go to the college lab, do my work, and then I was usually hanging out with kids. They would range from about 12 to 17 years old, and my expectation was to work with them, guide them, and honestly do a lot of youth to staff relations, because kind of like Alissa and Josh kind of touched on, a lot of those peer relationships are really important. So when a kid can basically look at an example of someone that's doing what they're supposed to be doing, even though they're in a really shitty situation, it helps. But not only that, a lot of staff aren't equipped to actually have those positive relationships. They don't know how to relate to a youth who's gone through trauma, or a youth that was brought up in a single parent home or a no parent home, or had to basically be raised around, drugs, alcohol, violence, gang presence, like all these different socioeconomic statuses that affect the way that the youth is raised, how our minds work. Like, I was 17 when I got locked up. Once I hit like 20, finally things started clicking differently. I knew that I wanted to do more. I knew that I could learn more. And that personal development started to become more of like a focus instead of just being a traumatic state of scared. Because that's pretty much what my entire life was up until I got locked up. But yeah, so I don't know if that kind of answered your question. That was kind of like a lot, but that's kind of what it looked like.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Robert, there's a lot of different things I want to ask you, and I'm trying to think of how to sum it up. I know you mentioned having good influences on the inside and not so good influences, but you also met a really core group of guys, a core group of people that appeared, you watching, from a distance, appeared to kind of keep you on the straight and narrow or give you the support you needed. Can you talk more about that?
So I guess that would, I'm off mute. I'm off mute. Okay, there we go. All right. It will go to kind of like the period in time I was in. So like I was in McLaren and stuff like that. And I guess I did have 5 select friends. I call them friends. I call them brothers to this day. 2 of them are my daughter's goddads, and like, you know what I'm saying? But I remember having this talk with one of them, my brother, Noah Schultz, and we were walking around the yard, and I'm kind of giving him the kind of what's going on. Like, hey man, it's going to be this fight. I'm trying not to get into it. I'm housed with these cats. These cats I'm more cool with. It's an awkward situation. I've been doing good for a while. And he gave me some game, and he's like, just because they're involved don't make you got to get involved. And I was like, all right, sounds good. Granted, I wasn't like initiated in any of those set gangs. I had my own. I was the only one from my section that was there. And I remember one of the dudes that of the side that was getting down, me and him talked also, and he was like, yeah man, he's like, I see the younger cats about to handle this, and I'm avoiding it. I have a mission in mind. And I was like, okay. I just started peeping how they operated and how they maneuvered and how people gave them respect. And I just kind of seen it as, all right, this is something that I need to take in. This is something that's different from everybody else. I don't like going to the hole. I don't like being in solitude. I don't like any of that. So for me to avoid this, I got to stop doing what leads me there. And I remember reading a book, I think it was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it was, it's more about finance, but it's kind of similar in thought. And it was like, the 5 closest that you have in your circle kind of dictate your pay, dictate kind of like your worth. And I took that again in the mental aspect of, I wanted to continue to grow. I wanted to do something different. That gave me time and opportunity. That's how I looked at it. So with this, I better come out with a college degree. I better come out with some certificates. I better come out with a trade under my belt, because I'm going to have to go twice as hard, twice as far when I touch back down. And I remember just my circle again, I can name all of them, but my circle we'd just sit down and kind of fellowship, and we'll cook and just chop it up and talk about, hey, what we're going to do when we get out. And I was lucky enough to, my brothers are still alive. Granted, this year in Portland, it's been a lot of murders, and I've lost a lot of individuals that were close to me. But these individuals are still close. But even then, they hold me to a standard, even now that I'm out and it's been 5+ years, is, hey, look, this is what you need to do. You need to get on track. And again, it goes back to being vulnerable. Again, the way they talked to me wasn't like somebody else could talk to me. The way they brushed shoulders with me was definitely different, because they opened themselves up to me as far as they wanted to see me grow as they were growing. And they didn't want me to fall amongst the tide of everyone else. But along with that, I felt like it was a challenge and duty to bring more with us. You know what I'm saying? Make a lot of young individuals at that time while we're there kind of settle down and think differently, be different, right? The definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. Telling that to a 15-year-old whose frontal lobe hasn't developed, telling that to a 16-year-old, telling that to a 24-year-old, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're running as they ought to, and it's off impulse, and they're learning through trial and error, right? And everybody sees an L as a loss. But this is the thing I kind of gathered over the years. If you take an L, you take another L, which is a lesson, you put them together, you got to win. You see what I'm saying? I do it for my kids when I teach. But it's something just something real goofy, but it keeps me on track. And honestly, that's how me and my circle is. So yeah, definitely.
Amy, Robert mentioned vulnerability and how it's hard for guys to be, I don't mean to keep saying guys, it's hard for people to be vulnerable with their peers on the inside. Another thing that I have heard from kids and adults on the inside is not necessarily wanting to share with their families on the outside what they're experiencing, and maybe like, I don't want my mom to worry. So I don't want to tell her how hard things are or what's really going on. With the parents that you work with, do you think that is something that could be going on? Do you think parents want to know actually what's going on, or that need that kind of protection?
We're still learning about things that went on through casual conversation. Protection, definitely. To me, that's all built on trust. And we took 7 years to build a trust with Jonathan. He said himself that he was a really tight onion that we learned to peel back piece by piece, and we're still learning and growing with that. Do we want to know everything? I don't think we have to know every nuance, but if there's something serious that a parent needs to step in and address, absolutely. And Jonathan was definitely honest and open with us a couple of times with situations where we had to ask questions and find out answers. And when we didn't like the answers, we would ask somebody else and ask somebody else, and went all the way up to the top. So, I mean, you hope that relationship is there and that the trust is there.
Alissa, I have heard good things about some educational accomplishments for you. And I'm curious what you think of the importance of education, or maybe you're just doing it because you're bored. I don't know. But is that important? How does that help you? How does that serve you, or does it?
I mean, 100% it does. So since I've been incarcerated, I've obtained my associate's degree. I also am a peer recovery counselor and a certified recovery mentor. And with all of that, like, not only am I learning just book work, but it's like experience that I can take into the units and into the different people that I interact with. I mean, honestly, like for me, knowledge is power, and I know a lot of people agree with that. And I mean, it's true. Like I focus a lot on my education here. That's my number one goal at all times, is just like obtaining as much information as possible, even if it's just like little stupid facts that I can bring into conversation. Like I really enjoy learning at least like one thing a day. And I mean, it makes time go by faster too if you're focusing on like deadlines for college assignments or whatever, like a couple weeks from now. Like I'm focused on that. I'm not focused on tomorrow or the next day. And I know that's really helped me get through my time. And then also just in general, like learning about personal growth and being able to apply everything that I've learned to myself and just gain more insight on who I am as a person, and how just this experience in general has like benefited me instead of just wallowing in it, you know what I mean? Like, because I mean, I'm sure all of us have done that to some degree, like felt bad for ourselves or just kind of sat and didn't know what to do with ourselves. But once you find that energy to just keep pushing and just find things to focus on, like it makes our lives so much easier. It really does.
Josh, I know education played a big role for you also. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah. So I was able to get my bachelor's degree through the University of Oregon and make some substantial progress towards my master's before I got released. And that was, I didn't really, the official college education that I started getting at the Oregon State Penitentiary didn't start until about 2008. There was, I was in a culinary arts work-based education program early in my sentence, and that was the last class. The class that I graduated was the end of the program. It got its funding pulled, and that was the end of that. And it was one of the last kind of college things that was held over after the 94 crime bill eliminated prisoner eligibility for Pell Grants. And so there was a large gap without much in the way of college being provided inside. And then in 2008, the Inside Out program started bringing classes into the penitentiary. And then that program kind of opened the door, and a anonymous donor, local here in Salem, saw a program about the college program that they have in New York and felt like we should have that here in Oregon. And so made some huge donations and pushed the right people. And that started a college program again in the Oregon State Penitentiary that was funded. And so the problem with a lot of the college stuff for guys prior to that was that there were some opportunities. You could do some correspondence classes or things like that, but it was very expensive. And when you're trying to survive on a prison wage, it's not very realistic to be able to pay for tuition and try to pay for phone calls home to family and try to not be a substantial burden on your loved ones. So in general, I mean, education has been huge for me. It was one of the biggest things that kept me on the right track, kept me driven. It has obviously, increased my understanding of my situation, my life, the world in general. And it is, I mean, like was mentioned, education is power. That's something that can't be taken away. And it's always going to be beneficial. It's always going to be, profitable. It's always going to help with getting a job or, getting a promotion. So, I mean, those things I think are the, kind of the tangibles, but what's more important to me is the way that it helped me to grow and to understand myself and the world around me in a way that I could interact with it more beneficially, pro-socially.
Catherine, I want to come to you next. We've heard a lot of good things and some not so good things about what you all have experienced. So I'm going to drop a really big question on you. Is this justice? And if it is not, what is?
Oh yeah, that's a big one, Taryn. And I'm gonna say I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you see Josh, you see Alissa, you see Robert, you see, I'm sorry, I can't, because I see Amy's name. I see Amy, I don't see Jonathan. Jonathan, you see me and you see that, and you might think in your head, prison worked, like they're reformed. But the truth of the matter is it wasn't the system that changed us, and it wasn't justice. Because justice is when you bring those who are victims on the pathway to healing while not throwing away the life of the person who committed the harm. And so it wasn't because of prison that I thrived and that I flourished. It was in spite of prison that I did so. So I don't think incarceration is in any way justice. Justice is, to me, especially when you're talking about children, is when all of them are treated in an age-appropriate manner for their actions with the objective of rehabilitating them and helping them reach their potential. And anybody that has experienced prison knows that prison does not do that. It was designed, it's punitive. It was designed to destroy, demean, and not rehabilitate. And whereas I see in Oregon that there are a lot of education opportunities, it was not that way in Florida, and it's not that way in most other states, that you don't have these opportunities for education and rehabilitation, and most of them are coming home without the skills and are not equipped to come out here and have a successful reentry. And even when you do, the collateral consequence is all of these degrees that we get. I had an associate's degree in religious education. I got a presidential academic scholarship for my GED grades when I came home. I was a certified law clerk for 8 years and received my certification, but no matter how much I prepared, when I came home for 4 years, I worked minimum wage entry-level jobs because I was a convicted felon. So a lot of us have walked into opportunities because of the support that we had when we came home, but the majority of people are going to walk home and have doors slammed into their face because of the label that's going to continue to follow them, because we think that once people have this concept that when people get sentenced and do their time, they've done their time and then it's over. But the truth is that it doesn't work that way. That label is going to follow you in your housing, in your health care, in your employment, and that's not justice. That's not justice.
See, I knew you could handle such a big question. Hey, Jonathan, you mentioned you've been out for about 10 months. Catherine mentioned a lot of stuff that follows you when you come out. What has been the hardest part of transitioning back to the community?
That's a hard one. There's a lot of different levels and ways that I can answer that question. I think the biggest that we can all kind of relate to is the fact that when you're in, you're given a set amount of options to kind of pick from, right? You know, we all have a set routine, a set, number of expectations and things that we got to hit for a day, and then we're done. Out here, it's like an open book. You can make any decision that you want to make. You can choose whatever you want to do. The issue is trying to refine that and have the discipline to focus on specific things that are going to be good for you, for one, and progressive for you for another, and not allowing the outer influences, external stuff to kind of manipulate you to do things that aren't going to be basically aligned with your goals. When I was I was super linear. Like I had shit lined up and figured out in my head how I wanted to do it, where I was going to do it at, who I was going to do it with, and everything. I had a release plan. I had the whole 9 yards. And guess what? I came home and I realized that the world's a lot different. Found these, which are terrible. Cell phones are terrible. Biggest time wasters in the world. And I got my eyes open, in a lot of different ways. Technology is crazy. Social media is crazy. I had Facebook and Instagram and all that type of stuff going wild for like a month. And I had to shut it all down because it was too much. You have so many different people that want pieces of your time throughout the day. And you have to whittle it down and figure out which people are actually there for you for the right reasons. And you got to kind of pick your support system, those people that you can kind of go to. But the biggest challenge for me was living with an actual family. Prior to being incarcerated, prior to my experience, in the system and all that type of stuff, I never lived in an actual family unit before. I never lived with my brother. I never lived with my mom or my dad. I was adopted when I was 19 years old, when I was still incarcerated. So I came to a home that I used to visit and have play dates at as a kid. And I had to basically come around to the fact that I got parents and, you know, structure, you know, security, safety. And to me, that felt extremely foreign, because the environment which I was in was one that was very disciplined and structured for me. And I knew everything to expect. When I came home, I knew nothing. My second night home, it was a lot of fun, but it was a little much. I came home probably 5 or 6 days before Christmas, and it was my parents' annual Christmas party where we had 55 people here and all sorts of shit going on. And it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. And I think a big part of, you know, reentry is sensory overload, and kind of getting used to everyday activities that seem so foreign to you. I only did 7.5, but it felt lifetime. I always tell this when I was working with kids. I mean, they could tell me that they were doing like 1 or 2 years, and I never told them like, hey man, that's baby time. I never told them that, because a year is a long time. A couple of months is a long time. You know, 10 years, a decade, it's a long time. It's nothing to joke about. It's your life. And since I've been home, I've gotten into a better rhythm. I finished up my school, and now I'm just trying to focus on basically having routine in the job and, you know, pursuing different things and working every day. But the hardest part is trying to figure out, you know, your new purpose. My purpose before I came home was to get out. That was legitimately my purpose. My purpose was to get out as quickly and as effectively as possible. And that was through clemency. And I worked my butt off to get it. And I owe Alissa and Venetia and my family and everybody for it. But that was my purpose. Now my purpose, I don't know what it is. I think my purpose is doing stuff like this. But I hope that kind of answers your question.
Robert, Jonathan hit on a lot of good things there, and I know I can ask you this as a friend, so you know it's gonna be a doozy, right? Why didn't you recidivate? When it's so hard. When it's so hard with out.
I mean, I smoked weed before it was legal. I mean, I kind of, no, I'm messing with you. Honestly, my family. It was a period in time where I did get in a fight and I hurt this kid very bad. And I remember having an MDT meeting, multiple disciplinary team meeting, where it was nothing but negative things they had to say about me. And it was weird because personally, I could have numbed it out. Like, this person has no merit, like, you hold no value in my life. I already see you as the man. I really don't care for you. Whatever you have to say, just it's in that one ear out the other. But I remember my sister, like, my mom passed away when I was younger, so my sister was like that person for me, other than my dad, and I had my stepmom. But my sister, she looked me in my eyes, and I remember her crying, and she's like, if you continue down this route, like, we're not going to be here for you. And one thing I've learned about my sister, she means what she says what she means. And for me, I knew gangbanging wasn't the only way. I knew that wasn't the only life. I knew one day I would have children. I knew one day I didn't want to keep looking over my back. I've already been put in a lot of situations where my life could have got taken before even seeing 17. You know what I'm saying? When I was 16, didn't think I was going to see 18. 18, let alone I would think I would be 28 to this, I mean, now. So when she said that, that was a big anchor for me. Once coming home, I believe it was actually right after that switch, right after I talked or had this meeting, I was like, you know what, I'm about to do something different. I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna try to break barriers in my family. I'm gonna destroy generational curses. I'm gonna do something my family never done. And I just started pushing hard. Once I came home, I'm not gonna lie and say it was the easiest thing and it was the easiest transition. For me, again, my story is a little peculiar as far as once I came home, immediately I went to DC and I was traveling a lot. So I was living outside of a suitcase and I really wasn't in my home. But I did have the anxiety of coming back to Portland, where my mentor stepped in and was like, hey, come live with me, go to school, continue that. And I just, again, it was more or less the exposure. So it was immediately coming out of jail, being able to travel and go see all over the country, to come back and experience college, speaking in a couple of your classes while I was in college, all that good stuff. And I mean, it's been 5 years, and sometimes, again, with this title and this record over my head, I find it hard to do different things. Like, I make good money. I wanted to live in a nice area, but due to I have 2 Class A felonies, I got denied a few different times in a few different places, and that becomes daunting. Always hearing no, and it's like, damn, this is the secondary conviction that they don't tell you about. This is the invisible conviction, right? And it got hard. It definitely gets hard, and I'd say right now it's about 10 different ways. Again, you pick up a lot of different ways in jail. You can either pick this route or that route. So there's a lot of different illegal things that you could impart. I mean, you could take place and do and recidivate, but it's just like, just the risk. It's like, why? I've been there, I've done that. I got that t-shirt. I didn't like that. Again, so to change the result, I have to do something different. And now I have 2 little girls to live for and make a good life for. And honestly, that's my anchor. Getting up at 5 a.m. every single day to crying. It's like, damn, I remember when I had to get up and sit on my bunk to do my earlier chores, but just to make it to this point, it's just like, okay, it's an achievement. Now what's the next achievement I could get? What's the next goal? Where's the next placeholder in life? What else can I do? And I want to see. And being behind bars is not that for me.
Josh, you're the most recent one to have gotten out and come back home. So what would you say was the most important thing for you in getting out? What has helped you?
Definitely the support that I have, the support of my family, my friends, my network of people. That is hands down like the biggest part of my success, of the biggest piece of making this transition smoother than it otherwise would be. And I've had the exposure to other people who have been released recently and have not had that much support upon getting out. And so I've witnessed the struggle that they have. And so for me, like, absolutely having that family support, the support of my loved ones, the support of, I mean, even still, Jonathan mentioned, Alissa and Venetia, and I text with them frequently. I was able to speak for Alissa's class recently. I've wrote a letter of thanks to the Governor Kate Brown, and actually received a pretty lengthy note in return from her that I felt was very supportive. And things like that are encouraging to me, and they help me to keep my mind in the right place and feel like, I need to be maintaining focus on positive things, and I still have things that I need to accomplish that are positive, and getting that support from people and direction and having so many questions, because like was mentioned, there's a lot's changed. It's been 22 years that I've served, and they didn't have self-checkout machines when I went in. I mean, there's a million things like that are, I have no idea how to deal with that. I never owned a credit card before incarceration. So everything out here involves learning something that the majority of the population takes for granted, and having that support I can shoot a text and be like, what am I supposed to do here? Those things I think are hugely impactful, and they make the transition so much smoother than for somebody who doesn't have those resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have so many more questions on my list and so much I want to talk to you about, but we're more than an hour in, and I see we've got quite a few questions lined up here. So if you submitted a question and I skip over it, it might be because I'm trying to combine some. Okay, so we kind of talked about what resources you had after you were incarcerated and while you were incarcerated. Are there any, was there anything offered to you, any kind of resources offered to you after you got out? And what resources were offered to you while you were incarcerated, and what programs were available? So Alissa, I want to come to you for the kind of resources and programs for while you're inside. And then I'm going to think about who to come to for when you're outside. All right, so Alissa, let's start with you. What sort of resources were offered to you? What kind of programs while you're inside?
Well, I'm at an OYA facility, so that might be different than other ones in the state. But so, I mean, we have like the substance use treatment, we have all of that. And then just recently, I think 2017, they started like the online college stuff. So they have like a contract with Lynn Benton Community College, and they have people taking like online classes, stuff like that. They also have certifications, like just random ones, I guess. Like they have a wildland firefighter one, they have forklift certifications, just kind of random stuff, I guess. And then also like there's a lot of youth that are just OYA and aren't like Department of Corrections sentence time or anything, and so their resources are a lot different from the people that are DOC within the OYA facility. So like I personally don't get a lot of the resources that the OYA girls would get. I'm not necessarily aware of a lot of those ones just because I don't get them. But in terms of like DOC, I'm not really, I mean, I have a couple months left, but they haven't really contacted me much about what they have to offer for like reentry stuff or really any type of resource for me getting out, I guess. But
And just to clarify for anybody who doesn't know, OYA is Oregon Youth Authority, and that's folks who've been adjudicated delinquent, and they'll stay within the juvenile justice system. DOC is the adult system, and so anybody who was sentenced as an adult, even from the age 15 up, they're considered part of DOC. Is that, did I explain that well?
right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Jonathan and Amy, I want to come to you together for the other part of that question about any kind of resources that were offered to you after incarceration, Jonathan in particular, and then Amy, is there any kind of supports to help parents for bringing a family member, a child back home?
Go ahead.
Aside from my $35 a month fee that I got to pay Washington County for supervision, not a whole hell of a lot, but from a personal perspective, I haven't really sought a lot out just because I've had really good structured family support, and I know a lot of networks that I have. So I didn't really need to search out a lot. I'm sure, Josh, you might be able to speak to a few that might have been offered to you upon your release. But for me personally, no one necessarily seek me out. I knew that I could take advantage of a lot that was presented to me from the Hope Partnership Foundation and Janus Youth Programs. I knew that I could probably network a whole hell of a lot through that. But I didn't necessarily need to because my family support was there. I was just going to school and already had a job lined up, so I was good to go. But in terms of the state reaching out, nothing at all.
Yeah. The Oregon Youth Authority does offer a parole officer while the youth are incarcerated, and it's my understanding that once they are released, they can reach out to the parole officer, I believe, for the next 6 months for resources. But again, we didn't need that.
Okay.
Did I say it right?
No, yeah, no.
Okay.
That's legit. I think.
But
critique of the model is just like it's kind of on the youth to reach out for resources when it personally should be the other way around, because in terms of support and peer support and adult support and community support, it would be kind of better to support the individual coming out and making sure that they're good instead of them having to reach out for help. Because I mean, we're in a way used to feeling disadvantaged and kind of helpless within the system, and last thing we really want to do is make ourselves kind of feel like more disadvantaged by always having to reach out for resources that could just already be provided there for us, especially when we may not even know the right questions to ask. Like, I didn't know how credit score, credit cards, or systems, or like all this different type of stuff worked, but luckily I had my mom, I had my brother to basically answer texts and be like, hey, this is how it works, this is how you break it down. But not everybody has family, not everybody has like a good friendship or whatever. That's just a critique I could go on for days.
The questions in the Q&A are so good, and I'm just I'm not even gonna try to put them into a theme. I'm just gonna roll through them. I'm not sure who to go to for this, so maybe shoot up your hand if you want to hit this one. Have any of you done time in solitary confinement, and if so, how did it affect you? Okay, let's do Robert and Catherine.
Yeah. I became very familiar with solitary confinement. My first 6 months, I got in a lot of fights and a lot of different just incidences and stuff. So I spent a lot of time there. For me, it was a growth period. And I think that was more due to the fact that I was already kind of hip or keen to like meditation and just kind of getting in oneself. That's not for everyone. I've seen people kind of lose it in a hole. But for me, it was more of, again, it was sitting down, of really getting inside my mind. What was my next steps? If I couldn't visualize it, it wasn't real. So I had to vividly visualize it and honestly manifest my future, and manifest where I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. I spoke it into existence. Hey, I want a job that travels, ended up getting that. I want this type of car, ended up getting that. And granted, it seems very simplistic, but it was those moments where being by myself actually gave clarity of mind. And then sometimes, honestly, it sounds kind of weird now to say, I would do different things just to get to solitary confinement, especially when I had too much time on like unit and stuff. It was just like, all right, everybody's bugging me. Let me throw this chair and walk to the end of the hall because I know I'm going. You know what I mean? Yeah, different things like that. But yeah.
Catherine, how about you?
I was in the very unique situation of being the youngest female to be convicted and charged as an adult at the time in the 90s. And while the court system deemed me adult enough to charge and convict me as an adult, when I was transferred to the Department of Corrections, they were like, what do we do with her? We've never had a 13-year-old. And their solution to that was to put me in solitary confinement. And this was traumatic for a lot of reasons, and mainly because here you are with a 13-year-old, not traumatized per se just from being in prison, but also have been through extensive sexual abuse that resulted in a life being taken, an experience that most people will never experience, and the guilt and the condemnation that came with that. And now I'm in a hole with no outlet, no one to speak to, no kind of counseling. And a year later, you let me out and expect me to be normal. And like Robert said, put myself in positions to go back repeatedly, because now at an age when I'm developing my social skills, I have been placed in confinement in a 6x9 cell where I get 3 showers a day and get to go out for an hour every week into a rec yard that's like a dog kennel. And then to handle that, to tell them about the nightmares I'm having and being suicidal, and the answer being to over medicate me on psychotropic medications, and then a year later release me into a population that was once again foreign to me. But also I've become adjusted, because that's what we do as kids. We're resilient, we adapt to our environment. And so now my social skills are handicapped. And so that is a practice that to me is barbaric. But even now, at the age of 35, so many years later, still dealing with the consequences of that solitary confinement experience, learning how to express my emotions, and what comes off as angry or aggressive to other people is just like my normal way of speaking, or I'm passionate, and knowing which social cues are correct. Those type of things were hindered. That development was hindered at a very, very critical age.
Yeah, thank you. Jonathan, you raised your hand also. What can you share about that?
So my experience per se, when I first went into the system, I went into a juvenile setting where we spent the majority of our time within our rooms. When I got charged as an adult, for murder, and I had to be in Lincoln County at that time. If you were charged with, say, a Measure 11, you weren't allowed to stay at the juvenile level. You were forced to basically go to the county level, especially when it was a person-to-person crime. During that period, I went from a somewhat lockdown system to being in solitary confinement for roughly a week, up until I was able to go on to the main population at 17 years old and figure out how I was going to do time for another 5.5 or some months within the county system. But going from relatively normalcy within the jail aspect, from juvie, then solitary confinement within jail, that really messed my head up, even though it was for a very, very short period of time. You don't know anything to expect. You're literally, like they talked about, in a 6x9 or a 6x10 cell, just trying to figure out what's my next move. How am I going to meditate on this and mull this over in my head and move on? Especially at that time, I was facing potentially 25 to life sentence. I didn't know what was going to happen for me. And I'm sure that could relate back to the rest of you a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question, Amy, this is going to come to you. We talk about the importance of parents advocating for their youth. Our BIPOC families come to mind. How can they get through the hurdles of advocating when they, as parents themselves, experience systemic racism or have barriers due to language?
The OYA is actually very good at being inclusive and diverse, I would say, with their communications. I know during the intake orientations, if there's a family there where English is a second language, they will bring in an interpreter to sit with them and relay the information and ask questions. Their communications often do come in Spanish or in different languages. So you have to ask. You have to ask or demand that there be translation.
Which is hard for a lot of parents to do in that system.
Yeah, yeah. But you've got to stand up for yourself and express your rights.
Yeah, is it okay if I speak on that too a little bit?
Sure.
From like my aspect in there. I get from the aspect that they need to basically have their voice and stuff like that, but from a more broader standpoint, not just at an OI level, but like at a county level and also within DOC, changing the mind frame that they have a voice, that they do have a say, that they can necessarily lobby and contribute and basically raise issues and go up that pipeline per se. Because a lot of people, when they encounter the justice system, they look at it as this big, terrifying thing, which it absolutely is. And they think it's necessarily unbeatable and that it won't change and it won't adapt to what's necessary. But I think that kind of proves a point with what my parents were able to do and what a lot of other parents have been able to do. But maybe more education towards the parents, family members, siblings, and just friends and peers that are trying to support others within the system itself, educating them that they do have a voice instead of just expecting them to use their voice that they don't know they necessarily have, I think is a more solution-oriented way to go.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, were any of you ever required to take psychotropic medications while incarcerated? Actually, show of hands on that one. Were any of you required? Catherine and Robert. Catherine, can I come to you first? Will you speak to that?
I don't want to say mandated. I was just young enough where I felt like a doctor knew what they were talking about. And as I said, the consequence of taking a life, the ramifications of that is emotionally and mentally, there's stuff that comes with that. And I was 13, I wasn't a cold-blooded, I was a scared, abused child trying to find a way out of a horrible situation. And I made a decision that impacted so many people. And as I did mature and get older and realize the true consequences of that it wasn't like TV, that there was no rewind, there was no reviving, there was there was going to be a ripple effect that was eternal. I didn't know how to deal with that. And as I explained that and acted out on that, the answer in the penal system was to just continually medicate me. And as I came home and I told my counselor about the medications I was on, these were medications that weren't even supposed to be put together. I mean, at 15, I was on Prozac, Seroquel, Trazodone, Xanax. One's like a horse tranquilizer, and it covered it up. I slept all day. The nightmare stopped. I was dependent on it to eat. The only way I could function was with this medication. And I actually had an experience where my dad, a sergeant, violated and told my dad about it, thankfully. And he forced me. He was going to withdraw all support if I didn't stop. And I went through withdrawals so bad that I called my family and said, I'm not going to make it out of prison. I'm going to die. I felt like I was dying. I had the chills. I was just withdrawals like you would see from any other drug. And I was on over 3,000 milligrams of medication that I completely withdrew from. And I couldn't walk. My body ached. And the only solution they would give me was to give me the medication. This is the only thing we can do to stop it. I'm like, I can't take it. My dad said no. And that was a very scary time. That was one of the few times that I thought maybe I'm not going to make it out of here. Maybe I'm going to die in prison. And but that was their answer to deal with the trauma that came along with, not only with my crime, but also the abuse that came after that. And it wasn't until 5 years before I was released that I did find true healing through the love of a mentor. But for the first 9 or 10 years, 11 years, it was just me surviving and just stuffing, and it just wasn't healthy. Yeah. And I'm gonna stop and get some tissues.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Catherine. Robert, would you like to speak to that as well?
I guess mine was more on a just sleeping level. When on the intake, there was an incident where I was asleep and 2 individuals jumped me. And after that, I could not sleep. Every noise just affected me. And I remember my stepmother, she was some type of nurse. And she was like, well, ask for melatonin. And I was like, okay. And it started off with melatonin. And I built an extreme tolerance to melatonin. It was just like, all right, it wasn't working for me. And then I would find myself staying up all night. And then they switched and went straight to an extreme, which was, I'm going to say Seroquel, where I was just doped up and I would just kind of just sit there and be in my mind, and gained a lot of weight at that time. And it wasn't good for me mentally. And then they again switched me to, I can't think of the last one that I was on, which was equivalent to like a horse tranquilizer. And I remember from that, some of the side effects was I started hearing voices. And schizophrenia runs in my family, so that was a scary thing for me, was starting to hear voices that weren't real and hallucinating. And I was like, need to try something different, need to figure it out. And I just stopped altogether. I didn't go through any withdrawals or anything to the effect or having adverse effects later on. But I definitely during that time period, it was kind of a blur, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And I honestly, I guess I feel like the system often does that throughout the system, from in being incarcerated to even in school. And especially Catherine said earlier about being Black and brown. That's honestly the first thing that usually happens. You get labeled super quick, different behaviors of just not even hyperactiveness, just being hyper. I remember when kids were able to be hyper, now it's hyperactive and all these other terminologies. And that's the first thing that happens is you get doped up and you get medicated and you start losing a sense of who you are. And honestly, I think that does a part, especially for a young person. Your brain's trying to develop, and with all these things that are affecting it, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing this stuff. We've had some pretty heavy questions. Our next questions are positive, but before we go into that, I want to talk about self-care. Catherine, I want to come back to you for that. Can you talk to us about self-care?
Yes, ma'am, Taryn. Thank you. Taryn, I'm sorry. My nose is all stuffed up. I didn't really understand the concept of self-care. I understood survival. I understood like taking care of myself as far as protecting myself. But and I'm sure that any mother can relate to this, the father, parent, but especially those directly impacted, because we are so I hear the word vulnerable, and that's one thing that's I feel like you have to kind of force and be intentional about when you're directly impacted, because that's not something that's definitely promoted inside the justice system, because it's considered a weakness. And so when I started working at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, one of my colleagues, Eddie Ellis, was intentionally creating like these self-care retreats and initiatives and programs. And I quickly learned that if you can't take care of yourself, you can't be effective in advocacy, at your job, in your families, and that it is so important. And to hear the reason for it, and I don't know how many directly impacted people have a story like this, but for Eddie, it was, his friend coming home and looking like he was okay, saying he's okay, but he wasn't okay. And he took his life. And we hear about the coping after you've done 15, 20 years, or as Amy, I believe it was Amy that said, like 1 year, even 1 year, and not really talking about it or having the space in order to talk about the things you're going through, because so many people, and this is not like a direct shot at like panels, but there's like this face that gets put on without really talking about the really hard stuff, the vulnerable stuff, to talk about the crap that we survived in there, that we went through. There are things that I endured in prison that I have not spoken of to this day, that if we don't deal with it out here, we carry that dump out here, and it touches every aspect of our lives. So self-care has become not only a priority for the directly impacted community, but for our organization as a whole. We make sure and we're intentional about taking time, like after this panel, because you touch on things that may hurt and that's raw, to take that time to say, you know what, I can't be a mom, I can't be a colleague, I can't be a coworker, I have to take care of me right now in my space. And that is so important, particularly for people directly impacted by the system, to be vulnerable, to have someone to listen to meditate, to find, if it's doing puzzles, swimming, taking a walk, getting a dog, to always prioritize taking care of yourself and doing something to be whole and find happiness and peace in your life. And it's so vital. And that is one of the things that I love about where I work and the initiative we do, and is reaching out to directly impacted people and giving them the resources and tools they need in order to be able to do so.
Thank you. Josh, I want to come to you on that as well. I met Josh while he was in prison. This is my first time getting to see him out of prison, which is really, it's probably more exciting for him than it is for me. I think that's fair to say. But one of the things that I saw you get to participate in inside were these different groups or these different events that focused on things like restorative justice, where they would talk about how it's hard to be vulnerable on the inside. I remember one of your peers in there saying, I can't go sit down at lunch and sit down with all the guys and tell them that, it's been a really hard day. I'm feeling really vulnerable right now. It's not a safe space for that. So how did you find those safe spaces? How did you find different ways to practice self-care in what is a really harmful environment?
For me, it was, I tried to just really focus on direction and, having goals and working towards attaining those. And as far as being able to get vulnerable, I was in a unique situation of having peers who were more open to that wall inside, and having family that came to visit frequently, and having a partner that came to visit frequently, people I called on the phone. So I was able to decompress a good amount of that stuff to the people who were around me. And then beyond that, just really, trying to capitalize on the things that were available. And, I wanted to touch on that just for a moment, and not to redirect the question, because I think it's connected. And that is that for me and for many of the people who I interacted with, having that program, having that, direction, those things that you could, participate in that were improving your life in some way, those things were the things that they became your self-care, because you were able to focus on and be involved in something positive. And all of us today have talked about being involved in these positive programs. With something that I don't want people to walk away from having watched this, is that those programs and those opportunities, many of them do exist, and the access to them is extremely limited. And so it's not like everybody in prison has access to college just because there's a college program at that prison. It is very limited, and very few people in totality, by the numbers, are actually benefiting from that. And so I think expanding those things would have a huge impact, not just on recidivism rate and success upon release, but upon the culture and the environment for the people while they're incarcerated. I think that it would improve the environment if everybody had the opportunity to be involved in positive things for the duration of their time. Then in my belief, I firmly believe that there would be a lot more people doing positive things. If they would not be trying to get in trouble, or not picking fights with each other, or not focusing on some kind of negative thing outside of themselves, just so they don't have to focus on their own, traumas and issues. So, yeah.
Thank you. Interestingly, that does kind of lead into our next question that was submitted on the Q&A. And Alissa, I want to come to you for this one. This person asked, what is one thing you believe the OYA is doing right?
Well,
You're answer carefully.
right. Well, I mean, there's a couple things, to be honest. I know that they've tried recently to have a lot more like programming, more resources, and be more like recovery oriented, rehabilitation oriented. And it's been really nice to see that the treatment, like substance use treatment team has grown a lot. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 of the peer mentors now. There's 1 certified alcohol and drug counselor. And that's really cool to see that grow. And I think that people are becoming to take it more seriously and actually put energy towards the treatment stuff, the substance use, drug and alcohol, because I think that's really big. And then also, I think that the staff in general, I mean, of course, there are some staff there that are like there for the paycheck, no doubt about that. But there are some that have experiences that they love to share, and trainings that they go to that they learn, how to work with us, and they spend energy to actually make a difference in our lives. And I know like some of us have touched on staff that have made a difference, that have been more of like a mentor, more of a family member, if anything. And I think the kind of balance that they have to balance between being a staff in an OYA facility versus like actually being a mentor or being helpful for us is like difficult for them. The boundaries that they have to set, the amount of things that they can share with us. And so I think that for the most part, like they've done a good job at balancing those things and being able to use the time that they spend here to benefit us instead of just working. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Amy, the next question is for you, or I'm going to send it to you. What percentage of kids in the OYA do you think have parents who are interested in engaging?
You know, that I read that in the Q&A and I'm like, you should save that question for tomorrow for Nikita. Because she can give you actual stats, I'm sure.
Actually,
Yeah. I do know, again, that the OYA has shifted a priority to increase family engagement, and I'm going to bring it up probably for a third time, that this intake orientation meeting that they had started, it's a monthly meeting for families whose youth have just come in intake. It's a great opportunity to learn about the agency and the facilities and to meet staff. This was not available when Jonathan was in the system, and it was the blind leading the blind. I think this is very helpful for parents, and again, they encourage parent involvement. So they're headed in the right direction. There's a lot of room for growth, for sure. You want to add anything? Go ahead.
in terms of what?
Just family involvement and youth. Did you, what you?
Like I used to participate and do the family orientation, speaking for the youth aspect and educating basically the kids that would come on first, coming into the system, and give them a heads up, like, hey, this is what it's going to look like. Along with that, just educating and just motivating the parents to stay involved. As for the actual numbers, what I'm more curious about is, by engaged, do you mean as in supporting OYA and not just their youth, but multiple youth, or their specific youth? What do you mean? Clarify.
I didn't write the question, Jonathan.
I know. I want your perspective, though. I'm trying to cheat. In terms of actually engagement with youth, it's minimal. Honestly, it's minimal. And as more time you do, more likely than not, the less engagement is actually going to take place. The less visitations, and the more visitations that you actually see more from peers, cousins, siblings, stuff like that. Parents slowly but surely, after the youth, say, comes in at 15, 16 years old, after about 18, 19 years old, you'll slowly but surely, uncles, aunts, parents, you don't really see a whole hell of a lot of them anymore, because they are now considered an adult. They should know what they're doing. They should basically be working, not working, but conducting themselves as an adult. But when you're in a youth setting, you're not necessarily going to be most likely able to do that if you're surrounded by kids constantly. So they still need that parenting. They still need that guidance. They still need that support. But a lot of times it's single parents coming in there and being involved for, say, a year or two. If their kid is luckily OYA, if they are DOC, the majority of which stop visiting as much after a while, and some of them just stop visiting altogether. So it needs to be stressed about the importance of it and why it needs to continue, because it does make a big freaking difference. Even though they feel like they can't parent a 20-year-old, trust me, it works. No one can guilt trip me worse than my mother.
I do think it's important to point out too that it's tough for a lot of parents to come visit and to stay involved to the degree that they would like to stay involved. You know, their kids may be placed in a facility that's really far away, or visiting hours are prohibitive with their work schedule, or they don't have transportation or childcare for other siblings, and siblings can't come visit. There are a lot of barriers to parent involvement too.
Within OYA, they will offer you gas vouchers. They will offer you avenues, transportation, direct transportation for you to actually go see your youth. In terms of, I'm not going to say excuse, because that can kind of be pointed in terms of not being able to have an effect. I've gotten letters that look like this, that say, hey, hi, I love you, I miss you. We're not going to be able to make it in. We had some family business going on. I hope things are good. Literally a sticky note. They had no clue what was going on with me that day. They had no clue the type of hell that I probably had to go through. They didn't know that I might have had suicidal tendencies or other shit going on in my head, or that I just saw basically a fight or something that could have triggered me. They didn't know any of that. All they knew is that, hey, I'm gonna send a sticky note that says basically, I love you. I'm not gonna be able to see you for a while. Hope things are going good. That alone can make a kid make a decision between giving up and saying, no, I'm gonna knuckle down. I'm gonna go a little bit more. So I see both sides, but it's not an excuse not to try. That's the biggest point, is to try.
Yeah, good point. Robert, I want to come to you for the next question. And we're actually getting short on time. When we first talked about 2 hours, it sounded like a long time, but we're starting to get short. So sadly for everybody watching and everybody submitting questions, we're not going to be able to get to too many more. But Robert, I want to hit you up for the next one. If you could make one immediate change in the system, what would it be?
Out of home placements, or initial contact. Actually, better yet, initial contact. The way you start the whole interaction. Again, at 13 going to jail, no, you should look at what's going on at home. What are the root problems? Again, everywhere in the world you can see, I believe it was Ghana. I was able to meet like some judges and prosecutors and stuff from Ghana, and the way they do it within their villages and sort of sub-villages, they have elders of these communities that they go to first. And I believe it's like a maximum of 3 years, no matter what crime it is for these youth, maximum of 3 years. But through this 3 years, it's an intensive care. Again, it's the whole village aspect. What was the cop that was involved? How did they stop you? What was the interaction like? What is your interaction at home? What's going on at home? You don't have food. Why don't you have food? How can we provide this? Essentially, breaking it down to all these reasons why you ended up where you ended up. Let's fill those gaps. Let's pave in those potholes on that road, so the next person that's coming down that road won't face it, or you won't. You know what I'm saying? You'll be able to get back. But with anything, I would say initial contact. Granted, in a perfect world, no system, and we'll figure out that as it goes along. But in this world, I would say initial contact.
Thank you. I want to make sure I fit in one question that is not in the Q&A, and I'm so sorry for everybody who is submitting questions. I want to make sure that we have time for this one thing, and then if we've got some time at the end, we'll hit up some more. I want to ask each one of you, what is the most important lesson that you want people to take away from this discussion today? Giving you a chance to think, because that's a big question. Josh, do you feel ready to answer this question?
I'll take a try.
Okay.
You know, the things I think that, I touched on it a little bit early on. I think that, I was 18 years old. I was not making adult decisions. I was treated as an adult all the way through the process. And I was very much not adult in my thinking processes. So I think recognizing that and understanding that, the way that we're currently doing things is improving here in Oregon. But we still are taking 18, 19, 20, 24-year-old people and treating them as though we want them to be responsible as an adult, when the science and common sense shows us that they are not. And so I think that there are different things that can be done in different ways that would address things in a better fashion. I think that the amount of support that people are able to have from staff, from volunteers, from family is super critical to people's success inside. And so any ways that those can be fostered would improve the outcome. So I think that, recognizing that and yeah, those are kind of my top things. And I wanted to shout out my brother, Trevor, who is a huge component of my support system. I don't think I mentioned him earlier, but we talk pretty frequently, and I get a great deal of sage advice from him, and I hope that people tune in tomorrow to watch him and the other great panelists.
Yes, good promotion for tomorrow's panel. Yeah. That's nice. Alissa, how about you? What do you want people to take away from this?
Honestly, like similar to what Josh kind of just said. I mean, developmentally, just to see where each individual is, because at the age of 13, what they need in their life in order to, get back on that right path is going to be totally different from someone who's 18, 19, 20. And I think just being aware of those things, and also being aware of what each individual can do in the system or not. I mean, we all know there's stereotypes, there's prejudices everywhere, and that's you know, it's carried with us throughout our time and after. Excuse me. And I think just being aware of those things and being able to have those conversations to break it down and really just change the perspective that people have about the system, about people with class A, B, C felonies on their background, the charges that they have. I mean, just being able to see past that and not look at the background for who they are as a person, but you know what they've overcome, and being able to just be open to that.
Thank you. Catherine, I'm coming to you. What do you want people to take away from this?
In order to achieve true justice, a couple of things will have to happen, and hopefully this panel helped us achieve one, is that we have to humanize those impacted by the criminal justice system. We're more than the labels placed on us. When you see us in the store, you would never look at us and say, he was in prison, she was in prison. We would be mothers, daughters, sisters, brothers. The fact that we committed a crime does not mean that we're no longer human, and that we deserve to be treated as humans and have the rights of humans. And also that in order for it to be, for there to be true justice, there has to be honest and transparent conversations about the root of the incarceration epidemic in America. We have to be, you know, take the wool from over our eyes and be honest and say that systemic racism is exactly, the mass incarceration is a direct result of systemic racism. That's where incarceration was founded, and it has to be addressed as such. And until we do, there will never be true justice in America.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, what lesson do you want people to take away from this discussion?
So next time, can I answer first, because they kind of got my answers? Honestly, it was already said. I just want you to take from it that everybody has a past. I remember some of the staff would tell me, hey, man, I did light crimes. I just didn't get caught for it. Everybody's human. Everybody learns from error. Again, you have lessons, you have losses. Just kind of humanize it and look at individuals that have been through the ringer and have been through situations and have gone and have done time as, hey, you know what? I understand you have a different struggle than me. I understand that all the pieces weren't perfect for you, and you lived, or you know what I mean, you acted accordingly to your circumstances and what you seem best in that moment. But that moment shouldn't be the definition of the rest of your life. You know, you pay yourself, you pay your time, you go, you do your time, and you come home. And honestly, I wish in a perfect world, the world looked at you in that manner of, hey, you paid your dues and you came back. Now let's put on new clothes after you taking this shower. But unfortunately, yeah. So if anything, take that.
Okay. Amy and Jonathan, I want to come to you next. Jonathan, how about you go first, and we'll let Amy have the grand finale on this question at least.
I was going to make her go first. Nice job.
Sorry.
I'm going to take a piece of it from actually a question that's on the board. And it talks about, describe a time you were given empathy by a professional while incarcerated. Was this rare to receive? I think to a degree, yes, it is rare, but it's not just from the staff members, but it's also from visitors, family, friends, relatives, people, community members, tours, all sorts of people that come by. I think the number one takeaway that I want people to have from this engagement and this opportunity to hear all these things is to embrace empathy, not just with individuals such as ourselves that have gone through these type of experiences, but within yourselves, within each individual person that you come into contact with, just like how we've been touching on it. Like, none of us knows every little bit about everybody's struggle or what they've gone through or the trauma that they've received or the things that have gone in their life or just the stuff that they've seen. We don't know. And it's wrong of us to hold a specific decision or choice against someone for a split second, or maybe multiple decisions that led up to an act for the rest of their life, and expect them to still be successful. I think true justice and true accountability happens when we're able to utilize these experiences and humanize them like we've been talking about, and help each other, build each other up. Because if we continue to, you know, gentrify and like tear each other apart, we're just going to make the system even worse than it is. Pointing fingers doesn't solve problems. Giving people hugs do. You know, supporting people, entire communities, families. You know, I was adopted when I was incarcerated. I don't think I haven't met a single person that has ever done time in Oregon, probably, that I know on a personal level, that has ever been adopted when they were incarcerated. I never expected anything like this to happen. I had no clue that my story was going to be like this whatsoever, and it was because of empathy. My mother taught it to me. You know, I worked as a mentor for youth for 2 years straight on an intake unit with kids that range from 12 to 17 years old. I never once asked them what they were there for. I didn't care. It didn't matter. What they did not matter to me. What mattered is what they're going to do with their time. What type of decisions and choices are you going to make while you're in this space so you can get home fast? I wanted to go home as fast as I could. Luckily, I got support and I'm home now. But we can't point fingers and expect things to be solved. We can't honestly point fingers at the justice system, say it's your fault either, because we voted. Everybody has a responsibility to basically act. You know, my number one takeaway that I hope you guys do is that you take a piece, just a small piece of what you heard, and share it. Legitimately share it with a friend, family member, relative, whatever. The one small piece that you took away from this, please share it. Because the more stuff like this is basically addressed and talked about, that's when the solutions can kind of come to play. But I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Amy?
Get over here. I got nothing.
Yeah, she does.
I know, I got nothing. I think everybody hit on everything that I wanted to say, and it's so funny because I was going to say embrace empathy. Really, I'm not going to compete with that one. Thank you.
To build on what Amy said there, I think, and Catherine, you mentioned this before we officially started the panel. You said usually when you're on a panel, you're the only person with lived experience. You're the one who's representing a whole class of people who have spent time inside, and you get to answer for everybody. This panel is different than that, in that you all bring what is arguably the most important voice in learning about the system. You know, we can read books about it. I can teach out of textbooks. I can tell my stories of visiting OSP or you know, working with youth in other settings, but nobody can teach this like you, and nobody brings the perspective that you do, and nobody's voice is as important as yours. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for sharing that with us. I hope it's okay for me to say, with all these questions and comments that are still coming in, I would like to invite those people to contact you through me. Because everybody has my contact information from registering for the webinar. So if any of you in attendance want to continue to ask questions of our panelists, you can send those questions to me and I will forward those along, and we'd be happy to keep the conversation going. I'd also like to remind everybody that we'll have a second panel tomorrow night with looking at the system from another side. And you know, you saw smiles and applause with our current panelists there. We've put together a collection of people who are working hard to do the right thing, and sometimes within a really ugly system, and they're trying hard to do the right thing. So I would invite you, if you haven't registered for that yet, to please go ahead and do that. And if you don't have that information, email me about that too, and I will get it to you right away. We have 5 minutes left. Is there any grand finale statement that any of you would like to make to wrap us up before we close out tonight?
Go see Trevor tomorrow.
Go see Trevor tomorrow. Good. So Josh's brother, Trevor Walraven, he has spoken to many of my classes, knows many of our panelists tonight. He'll be on our panel tomorrow, including the attorney who worked on Josh and Jonathan's cases. We have folks.
Didn't I, Carlos?
Yes, we have
Carlos Chavez. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a really incredible group of people tomorrow as well. So please join us for that. And thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you all the attendees for joining us tonight. And we will go ahead and call it a night. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.